Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 2.
Chapter 16.
Decades, if not centuries, of layered dust, loose stone, and as Nara's face encountered on several occasions webs from native arachnids, prevented her from controlling her trajectory as she fell head over heels through the cold, chaotic darkness. The fear that had gripped her in the initial seconds when the ground fell out from under her feet had been replaced by the instinct to merely keep herself alive. Whatever the device she had pulled from the hole in the chamber, it was falling with her. The beams of its light somersaulted through the air, causing a miasmic dance of tumbling shadow that aided in the dizzying chaos and threatened to bring her to madness. Nara had lost count of the times she had scraped and bashed her head on the canyon wall. From the velocity of travel, she knew she was bleeding from several cuts, severe scratches, along with her arms and legs, which may or may not be broken. Suddenly, with a crack of bone and a loud thunk, her body collided with the ground, her face smacking the cold stone, sending a bright flash of searing white-hot pain shooting through her skull. She groaned. Her head felt like it was splitting into a massive singular spasm as a tolling ring grew louder in her ears, seeming to vibrate and grow with intensity through the entirety of her bones. She blinked several times, catching a glimpse of an inverted Katachi before her. It was bathed in crimson from the broken blood vessels in her eye. Soon it would swell and shut and render her completely blind. Not real. Holo. Even her whisper caused her pain. Her head began to vibrate with the rest of her skeletal structure, expanding the excruciating torment tenfold. Nara could feel shock setting in and knew she only had a few minutes of consciousness left in her. She slowly assessed her injuries. She flexed her hands, assuring herself they were still there and not broken. Gingerly, she felt the cold stone underneath her. At least she was on a solid, flat ground. She shifted her position slightly and groaned again. She took a deep breath. Each inhale brought new levels of suffering. Broken bones, Nara said aloud, spitting blood across the stone in front of her. She attempted to wiggle her toes, finding at least 6 cooperating. Pain? Yes. Alive? Yes. Intact? Mostly. Even though she was in excruciating pain, she felt it was safe to remain where she was. Good plan, she thought, not having the strength to move anyway. Taking another breath, a new wave of dizziness hit her, and then consciousness failed her utterly. She closed her eyes. Nara had no perception of time, only her perception of pain as she returned to some form of lucidity. She could hear some heavily accented voice keep repeating itself in her head, a voice she had never heard before. She tuned it out because, more importantly, everything hurt. Not one specific area, region, or part, everything. She dared to open her eyes, finding only the left eye would comply. Then she pressed her hand painfully downward to push herself from the dusty stone floor. Although the ringing in her ears had subsided, the voice remained. Her left eye struggled to focus as she became aware of a flickering blue light emanating from somewhere close to her. She pushed herself up high enough to roll to her side. The action brought a fresh groan to her lips. With significant effort, she sat up. Patting her right hip, Nara was grateful that her saber hilt was still present, although she didn't remember having the time to reaffix it to the clip before falling into... What? Where the hell am I? Her voice was almost foreign to her, dry, raspy, and it hurt her head dreadfully. Nara attempted to grip her saber hilt and remove it from the clip, but found the smallest finger on her right hand completely broken. It protested painfully against movement, and she sucked in her breath. Her thumb, too, was bent the wrong way. A fresh river of blood streamed from her ruptured knuckles. She knew she had to fix the thumb before anything else, and without wasting time wondering how painful it would be, she slid the hand into her lap, gripped the thumb with her left hand, and snapped it back into place. Not having the energy to scream aloud, she sucked the anguish through clenched teeth, making a sound she'd never heard before, then dropped both hands as the swelling commenced. She retired her right hand to disuse at her side for the time being. After a moment, she reached across her body with her left hand to grip the saber hilt and jerk it off the clip with an audible grunt. Closing her left eye, Nara blew a breath out slowly, providing some reprieve for her aching ribs, and then proceeded to calm herself as thoroughly as possible. Darth Cognis. The voice that had yet to cease repeated the same term that had brought to her attention subconsciously. Ignoring her body-wide ache, she opened her one working eye. She used the index finger of her right hand to touch the puffy flesh around her eye, and then forking the index and her middle finger, she tried to pry it open. Although only a sliver of light appeared, it comforted her knowing at least her eye was functional and would heal. Nara concentrated on locating the flickering blue light source. It was to her right. She blindly reached out with trembling fingers until she grasped the small cylinder. Using the fingers that worked, she spun it around and aimed the off-kilter image onto the stone wall in front of her. Her earlier observation had been correct. It was a picture of an aged female Katachi. Nara rolled the cylinder over, writing the displayed image. She could make out the creases lining the woman's wrinkled face and saw one of her downward turned horns was broken off. Her eyes, color indiscernible through the hollow image, burned with an ancient wisdom. The cylinder flared with a static buzz, then repeated, Darth Cognis. She remembered the name from her independent studies and understood the relevance of the cerebral connection her memory was making. Zana, Nara said aloud, listening as her voice revealed the diminutive chamber she had come to rest in by its complete lack of echo. Bane? She remembered the last portions of some of the writings authored by Zana, referring to her master as well as her own eventual apprentice. Nara ignited the lightsaber in her left hand. Its warm hiss a welcome addition to the foreign, cold silence. She scanned the chamber. The crimson saber, conjoining its light with the blue hollow emission, bathed her surroundings in a soft amethyst teal. She was in a vacant stone enclosure adorned only with a stone bier carved into the wall to her right. She put the device down and transferred the ignited saber to her right hand, her thumb already feeling better. She pushed herself to her feet with her left. The pain was instantaneous. She hissed through clenched teeth, her body protesting her actions vigorously. At last she stood and her chest heaved from the effort. Lighting the saber again, she saw the carved bier had a sole occupant inside, a humanoid form of average height with tight bindings of a crude fabric encapsulated the figure. Nara braced her aching body against the edge of the bier and edged closer to it. Without fear, she placed a hand over the body's head, feeling the features underneath. It felt like a mummy and definitely not alive. She took a moment and considered her situation. From what she could assess, she was trapped in a stone chamber with a solitary lightsaber, a mini holo emitter, several serious injuries, and now a dead body. How the hell did you get in here then? Casting the light all around the room, she saw a hole in the ceiling, but no other form of exit, crevasse, or crack. Her gaze went back to the body. Darth Cognis. Her attention was drawn to the device again, and she realized she had left it on the floor. With a shuffle and a grunt, she bent over and retrieved it. Nara decided to deactivate it, praying there were no more surprises in store for her. She hit the button and aimed it at the wall opposite the stone bier, and then with a slight hesitation, she depressed the button one more time. The device activated from the beginning with a refreshed and much clearer image of the aged Tok'chi. I am Darth Cognis, Dark Lord of the Sith. The woman speaking paused. Nara suspected for effect. She knew of this person, yes, but very little. I have seen you, Marillion, though I do not know from where you come. What? Nara thought. Deactivating the device? That's impossible. Darth Cognis died at the hands of her apprentice. Nara fumbled for the name, remembering the excerpts written and committed to holodata, realizing only then that she had said the words aloud. At least I thought she had died, she thought, her mind grateful for something other than pain to concentrate on. Activating the device again, Nara stared blankly into the woman's eyes, their greenish hue tinting at the sickly yellow she knew them to have been in life, and listened through the first portion again. More to the point, I do not know from when you come. Again the Tok'chi paused. Riveted by her words, Nara stood up, the burgeoning aches and pains forgotten. I do not know what draws you to Ambria, only that my master has foreseen it. Nara swiveled to gaze at the wrapped figure behind her. She has fallen from the teachings of the Sith and cast away from the dark side, however remaining vehemently opposed to the light. The Katachi continued, sounding neither harsh nor critical. Where Nara would expect Sidious to spit the words from his mouth with venom, Cognis almost sounded saddened. The context of what was said piqued Nara's interest, most of all because Zana had embraced her own journey toward balance in life. Zana is worthy of the Darth title no more, and thus has become expendable. Her defeat will come at my hands, this I have foreseen. Again, Nara swiveled to eye the body. A Katachi's apprentice is a dangerous risk, mistress. Yet your presence, Marillion, remains a mystery that I cannot divine. How could she know? Precognition? Premonition was one thing, this was another matter entirely. Nara worked the centuries out in her mind. She remembered Cognis's apprentice, Millennial. She chuckled despite the pain in her chest. Appropriate, she said aloud, the action bruising her ribs. The Katachi continued. Fitting, then, that you find yourself in a tomb built for two. Nara's eyes widened, her worst-case scenario realized. Know only this going forward. Whatever fate befalls you, he remains, and he will be forever with her. I have said this. I am Darth Cognis, Dark Lord of the Sith. The device deactivated itself this time, reducing the chamber to the blood-red hue of Nara's lightsaber. For several minutes she stared at the wall where the prophetic Sith Lord from Zana's time had conversed with her through the ages. She felt the weight of the words fill the room as they began to register, that panic beginning to press down on her already damaged body. She fought the oncoming sense of absolute hopelessness, knowing it wouldn't serve her here. She would only give Cognis's words power if she gave into it. Nara had not come all this way, ventured so far onto this path to give credence to a recorded message, a millennium removed from her time and space. Yet looking around, the chamber was precisely as stated, a tomb. Nara broke her gaze from the opposing wall and half turned toward the wrapped body. There were no doubts remaining in her mind whatsoever on who this person was. Zana? Nara chanced the audible evocation, wondering why the spirit had been silent since she entered the cave. The thought occurred to her that this may be all be transpiring in her mind like it had been when she arrived on Ambria, but she knew it wasn't. She knew she had shattered the veil. Zana hadn't dropped it only because she had finally seen what she had expected. Nara stepped over to the bier again, lifting her saber as she did so, its crimson light bathing the enclosure as a blood portrait. She focused her gaze on the figure's head, placing a hand gingerly on the wrapped forehead and brushing downward over the pits of its eyes, the bridge of the nose, and the creases of its mouth. She pulled her fingers back slowly as they crested the soft chin. The inspection left her mystified. She felt lividity under her fingertips. How was that possible? Nara stared for a long moment at the shrouded figure's head, the electrical snapping of her lightsaber providing the only sound in the tomb as it crackled with vibrancy, too much so as it caught her attention entirely. She withdrew the saber and herself from the body, stepping back a few steps to swing the blade in an arc. The motion screamed pain through her muscles, but she carried on. As she had expected, the blade's variable pitched hum reacted with the air before it recreated an identical crackling electronic discharge. There's air in here, Nara said, and then rolled her eyes. Of course there's air in here. I'm breathing, aren't I? Fresh air, idiot. She felt she may be losing a portion of her sanity as she had come close to losing the argument with herself, but she had been right. Nara hobbled her way toward the hole in the ceiling that had unceremoniously dumped her into the chamber. She sniffed the air, taking a deeper breath as she neared it. She couldn't feel or sense any change in the ventilation coming through the opening. She sniffed again, causing fresh waves of pain to move across her face and cheekbones. Nara limped back toward the cavern, relying on her working senses. Where it had once felt heavy, dense, and aged, it was now beginning to lighten and revive her. She gave herself entirely to her sense of smell for the first time, noting the lack of scent coming completely from where she stood. Yet the closer she got to the body, the sweeter the air smelled, like dried wildflowers or aromatic herbs, although she couldn't name them with any kind of precision. Cognis had gone to great lengths, it seems, to lay her master's body to rest. But how? After diligent, eliminated simple explanations, Nara felt assured the answer she sought lay with the body itself. Again she approached, holding her saber over the prone form, knowing the answers did indeed lie within. Freeing up both her hands, she laid her saber lengthwise on the other side of the body to inspect the wrapped linens. Finding an end plastered to the conglomeration of infinite folds, she pried it loose with her left hand as she slid the working parts of her right hand under the head. Again, the lividity of the corpse surprised her as the neck bent forward with absolutely no resistance. Nara was vaguely aware of her own heartbeat slamming in her chest, the claustrophobic nature of the chamber bearing down on her, applying even more pressure to her already aching head. Am I afraid? Nara asked herself as she pulled the edges of the end piece free and began slowly unwrapping the layers. Not fear. I've embraced my fear. She winced slightly as she brushed against her broken fingers. Oh, certainly not fear of death. She saw pale flesh beneath the final layers began to reflect the crimson light. Not death, not mine or yours. Her voice had dropped to a whisper as she revealed a pair of supple lips and a delicate porcelain chin. Nara stopped moving and inhaled sharply, momentarily startled. She was flabbergasted to see that the body had not decayed at all. Logically, her mind filled in the passage of time with decade-long leaps. Illogically, the flesh she was looking at remained buoyant and smooth, the lightest shade of white Nara had ever seen. She continued unwrapping, revealing ear-length gold curls, still vibrant and soft rather than dry and brittle. Her ears and cheeks the same hue and texture as the chin and mouth. A powder of fine cerulean covered her eyelids. Nara leaned down and gently blew the layer away, uncovering the woman's closed eyes. Xana, Nara whispered slowly. The aromatic fragrances emanating from the body overtook her. They filled the chamber with their enticing aroma. Nara breathed them in deeply, feeling a semi-intoxication work into her mind. Instead of the anticipated grogginess, she felt the opposite. It invigorated her. Her sense of self was heightened and all doubts disappeared. Any inkling of fear she may have harbored was cast entirely away. She felt rooted to this space, knowing where her feet were compared to the veins of composite minerals within the structure of the stone that encased her, yet her mind was outside, outward, expanding. Cracks, striations in the stone strata revealed themselves to her probing mind. With this new energy, she pushed farther and harder in all directions, as the last strain of rocks gave way to the open prairie beyond. Nara knew she had found her exit out of this place. Refocusing her gaze on the body before her, she began to delicately but swiftly remove the remainder of the wrappings. The rest of the body was clothed, the chest and torso adorned with a smooth overshirt and layered with a thigh-high crimson and brown patch leather coat. Brown leather leggings and mid-length black leather boots rounded out the sight. A black belt was at Xana's waist, and the longest saber hilt Nora had ever seen was affixed to it. Her attention was drawn to the hands overlying the chest. Brown gloves covered the flesh, and as she appeared to be holding something close. Prying the fingers loose and again surprised by their supple nature, she pulled then pushed the right hand away as the left hand turned on its own toward her, palms open, fingers flattening outward as if to present her with a small 2x2 centimeter cube. Startled, Nara staggered backward. There is no way that just happened. Yet she knew it did. She eyed the cube from where she stood before working up the nerve to approach it again. The item was a nondescript tan, featuring several light-colored striations. She squinted her good eye to get a better view. It appeared that each side she could see had a circular opening revealing a matrix of the same colored material. Her curiosity would not be satiated in simply viewing it. She had to touch it. Nara stepped toward the pro-offered hand and took the item from Xana's hands. The cube was cumbersome for its size and required both her hands. She turned it over, seeing that it had all 6 sides were exactly identical, and she was surprised to feel the material was a dense stone. Nara brought the stone cube to her eye and inspected the complex matrix. A 10-sided geometrical hex, almost spherical, hovered within the cube's frame. A minor, identical hex was suspended inside the first, and then another and another, all composed of the same stone material. Yet it was unlike any stone Nara had ever encountered through any recollection of hers. She had no idea what it meant, its function, or even why it was presented to her, only that it was now in her hands. Nara looked from the cube to Zana's body, walking closer to the raised hand. She gently pushed it back into place, folding the other hand on top, returning them to their eternal vigil. She turned her head to take on the vestige of Zana's restful face. She gave into the urge to brush her eyelids open and gasped at the sight. It was a pearly white orb, vibrant and pulsing with a life of its own, and the eye stared back. They were the identical swirling spheres that presented within Zana's spirit form. Nara bit her lip and looked away, yet immediately felt the hypnotic pull to return to the depths of Zana's gaze, a gaze that wouldn't hesitate to draw her in completely. She was astounded. "Even in death you enthrall the living," she said softly. And then she respectfully brushed her eyelids closed once again. With renewed determination to leave this place, Nara faced the far wall, her perceived escape. She ignited her saber, took a step forward, and plunged the blade deep into its depths. Arcing the implement clockwise, she stepped back on the blade as it met its initial cut and raised her damaged right hand to call upon the force to break the rear of the circular stone free of its mooring. The chamber filled with audible cracks and loud pings, and the smell of forced friction and volumes of ruptured dust wafted in the air, filling her lungs and obscuring her vision. She bent over, coughing, realizing that even if this method worked, there wouldn't be enough room in the chamber to house the number of sections she would need to cut free. As the dust settled on the floor, Nara approached the wall again, this time slashing wide gashes vertically through its surface. She grunted with the effort. Although it was working, the process would be arduous and the task would be severe. Her blade was not hot enough to cut through with each slash, requiring a second and a third to complete the action. It was also not wide enough. She would have to increase her swathi pattern threefold to keep her skin from blistering from the muscle beneath. And she was also in no condition to expend exorbitant amounts of energy without the certainty of losing consciousness again. Nara was broken, battered, damaged, and almost blind, half-naked, and barefoot. With a groan, she stopped slicing at the wall and felt the unmistakable rise of doubt, hopelessness, and anger threaten to rise up and take control. Her thoughts betrayed her. "You're too weak. You'll never be strong enough. Give in to your anger and your hate and end this now." No, she would not crawl into a corner and die. She could feel the screams from deep within her core, the solidity of her stance against anyone, even herself, who doubted her strength of will or intent. In the second it took for her to think her next thought, she was both proud and ashamed. She had raised both hands, calling upon the anger and hate to destroy the stone, and even though she knew she had the power to do it, it would bring the remainder of the stone crashing down upon her. But more importantly, her heart knew it was not the answer. Nara lowered her hands. There was always another way. Cradling her broken ribs, she watched as the last of the rocky silt settled onto the tomb's floor. She stared hopelessly at the small opening she had already produced. How am I going to make it out of here? A sudden memory took hold of her, a similar time in the distant past when she had felt hopelessness. She had been cowling in the gloomy wake of a destroyed droid factory on Geonosis, and Ahsoka Tano had squeezed her shoulder, affirming her that they would make it out, that they would live, and that they would do it together. And they had. Thinking of this, Nara took a seat onto the dusty floor. She moved slowly, not wanting to re-injure herself by slipping on the loose dirt and rubble. Finally seated, she deactivated her crimson blade. The darkness of the chamber was absolute. Then she did something she had never done before. She closed her eyes and called upon the light side of the Force. Through her memories as Barriss, she concentrated on her breathing, feeling it flow into her without reservation. She closed off the dark side completely, allowing the light to fill every part of her. Images of Undali floated through her subconscious mind, her form smiling, nodding with satisfaction. Images of Masters Yoda and Salsi Tin seated at either side of her, adding their meditative concentration to her own. She envisioned her escape through the walls and out into the open plains of Ambria through numerous scenarios. However, none of them resulted in anything but the complete collapse of the chamber from the tons of precarious stone above her. The light side offered nothing but the sweet consolation prize of death, albeit a path less destructive, yet more sudden than that of what the dark side could offer. What is the path between? Concentrate, Nara. She knew there was an answer that was eluding her. Anything was possible. It was just a matter of figuring out how to traverse the path Ahsoka had told her years ago. Belief is not always the correct tool, but a starting point nonetheless. Verbatim, Nara mouthed the words Ahsoka had uttered long ago while sparring in the Jedi Temple. Her friend had helped her to maximize the defensive superiority of Sora Seu. Despite Nara's internal turmoil regarding the Togruta, she was finding how beneficial her mentorship had been with each passing day. Belief in what? She pondered, feeling the dust caking on her lips. In the Force? No, not now, not this again. She felt that hopelessness threatening to creep back in. If not now, when? Her mind was racing. Who was saying this? You've been removed from every hindrance imaginable, Nara. You've turned your back on others authoring your life, and you've made peace with your old master. You've accepted responsibility for actions that weren't even yours. You've embraced love, compassion, courage, and fear, and yet you remain stoic in your stubborn refusal to accept yourself. Nara spun her head, looking for a voice that wasn't there. You will never succeed if you do not believe you can, Nara. The voice was hers. A wavering and timid voice that threatened the core of the power she thought herself capable of. Belief is not weakness. Nara, it is your strength. Embrace it, and get us out of here. Nara pushed herself back to her feet. She grabbed her saber hilt and ignited the blade once more. She looked at the crimson saber, felt its vibration in her hand, watched as the energy waved along its edges, and then stared at the lack of progress the blade had made in the wall. She was beginning to understand what her mind had been telling her. Believe in yourself. She knew now what she must do. With renewed vigor, Nara walked back to Zana's body and unfastened the long hilt at her waist. The cool cylinder felt weightless as she slipped the clip open and brought the elegant weapon before her. She turned it over in her hand, inspecting its surface and intricacies within the crimson glow. Noting the opening at either end, her eyes widened in surprise. The legends were true. Zana had indeed wielded a saber staff. Twin activators placed at a finger's breadth apart, allowing for ease of use with one hand. She could see no other controls, no tuning dials or amplifier nodes. It was what it was. Zana's saber. Time slowed to a crawl. The after effects of her early attempts drowning the chamber in an almost anticipatory silence, as if it knew the importance of what she was about to do. Nara deactivated her lightsaber, the crimson hue fading into inky blackness. In the next instant, she grips the saber staff in her left hand, placing her middle and index finger over the activators, depressing them simultaneously. The staff ignited, bathing the chamber in a radiant amber light so intensely dazzling it forced Nora to squint her eyes against its brilliance.
Palpatine snapped his attention to the aether, far from his current surroundings, the voice of Yasan Isar drowning into obscurity, his mind reeling from being dragged so far from his grip of reality. A vision began taking form as the immediacy of the conference chamber where he was seated wavered at its edges. It flung him to a desolate landscape far removed from his current position. With wavering images brilliant in their reds, oranges, and yellows, he traversed the broken ground in a spirit form at lightning speed to face a crimson rock wall standing 100 meters above him. A deep rumble presented itself as it resonated through his feet and into his very bones, vibrating at threatening levels of internal destruction. The wall before him exploded in massive stone shards and chunks. The arcing fan of blood-red stone and debris hosted the impression of the cruelest carnage imagined. As the dust settled and smoke cleared, he saw a figure emerge from the gaping wound in the wall, walking slowly and dripping power. The figure looked familiar, although the twin orange beams of energy adorning either end of the saber staff in its hand did not. The emergent figure was familiar, although his first instinct was to utter the name, Xana. "This could not be Subject 23, he said aloud as the figure of the Miri Allen clone stepped free of the stone and deactivated the saber staff. He saw her scan the horizon before her from left to right, then settled her gaze on him, a solitary figure clad in black and deepest purple from head to foot. Palpatine watched carefully as she stretched a broken smile across her damaged face. Her right eye swollen shut. Then, before he could blink, she was directly in front of him at supernatural speed. She made no threatening move, only bowed before him with condescension, a mocking tribute she laughed through. Yes, she is laughing, his mind registered. He watched as she erected her frame, winked her good eye briefly, and mouthed words he didn't expect. "Thank you." Just then her hand shot outward at impossible speed, immediately thrusting the Dark Lord of the Sith back through time and space, forcing his visionary spirit back into his corporeal form with enough force to knock him from his seated position and onto the floor of the conference chamber. The cascade of voices suddenly stopped, alarmed by his sudden upheaval from his chair, and then they rushed to his aid. He couldn't make out their words, faded and garbled, only the laughter accrued his interest, his complete interest and focus. It was a deep, gargling laughter that he had heard before, one that would inspire fear had he known of such things. "I told you, Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith. I warned you." Bane had warned, as the laughter ensued and then faded from his mind. Panting feverishly, a crazed grimace creasing his already deformed features, he batted away the numerous hands and arms extended in his direction as he pushed himself to his feet and returned the cowl to its position over his craggy forehead. The images of those standing around him spinning, he searched for the only one that could aid him now. Finding the warbling form of Sate Pestage, he grabbed at the man's arms, making 3 unsuccessful attempts to do so before pulling his advisor close. "Where is Vader?" "Carrying out your directive in the Kuat system," he replied before leaning in to whisper confidently in the Emperor's ear. "Both Silo and Tag have been eliminated." "Get him back here at once, Sate. I need to speak with him, in person." "My lord," Sate Pestage responded in a similar whisper, meant for his Emperor's ear only, as he procured a hand on Palpatine's back and helped usher him from the conference chamber altogether.